If y'all ready, we'll get started. I think we have a quorum here. I want to thank you for coming to the Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting today. And we've got three very good bills because I know we got three very good authors, and that's how I judged them because I just got a hold of them. I hadn't had a chance to read them yet, so I'm going to judge them by the author. But first off, our chairman, Ron Stevens, and we'll give him the privilege of going first on House Bill 235.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, committee, House Bill 235, you may recall, last year our former Speaker Emeritus, I suppose, Burkhalter, presented this bill, and essentially we just ran out of time before he could spend the time to get it done. But what it does, very simply, is in a 4 square mile area, in the third largest economic engine in the entire state, which is in the Congress Center, what this does essentially is any new projects is to dedicate those sales tax dollars for the state portion on projects that are 30,000 square feet or more. Dedicate that portion of the sales tax to infrastructure in that area. It will help of course, the Congress Center. It will help the Georgia Dome, the new stadium area, but from a 4 square mile area, pretty tightly drawn. So that we ourselves, the state, can direct those sales tax dollars to the infrastructure. And very simply, in the shortest, concise, it does cover if, for example, the aquarium decided it wanted to make a large expansion, it would also cover that up, and it's defined on page 1 with an expansion, but it has to be at least 15,000 square feet, so just nothing insignificant. And, Mr. Chairman, that's essentially it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have any questions? Oh, come on. Let's don't let him off that easy. I do have a couple, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you. I haven't had a chance to read the bill, honestly, since we've been gone all morning. But do you know how many dollars this is roughly going to generate?
We don't. And since it's all plowed back in, there's no current dollars would be spent that are currently in our budget. And this is only on new projects. For example, the NCAA Hall of Fame, which is scheduled to come, the Civil Rights Museum, which is scheduled to come, all of those dollars, of course, will be plowed back into that area so that it doesn't get lost in some budget, either ours specifically, but that it can only be used for infrastructure for that area.
So my understanding that this is future dollars that are generated only by the new or everything within that 4 mile area
only
existing?
Only on new projects.
Okay.
Everything that's existing will continue to go in our general fund.
And one other question, and how long will this be for?
There is no sunset.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? The chair will entertain a motion at this time. We have a due pass motion, a first and a second, on LC 361732. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee.
If you don't mind, we're going to take about a 5-minute recess. We just have these two bills that are coming up, 475 and 448, that we're not quite ready to hear. We've got to have a little bit more information, and it's on its way over. Thank you. Okay, I think we got what we need now. Representative Allen Peake of the 137th and House Bill 448, and you tell us what document you're reading from.
1086. Is that the document that you guys have? I'm here today to present a bill on behalf of the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, which, as you know, is in Macon. There are currently about 250 members, and just by simple oversight, I'm not sure that any of the members on the committee are in the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. I'm sure that's probably due to be happening sometime soon. the phenomenal athletes that we probably have on this committee. I'm sure you'll be in there soon. So, and what we're doing with this bill is provide an opportunity so that when, for instance, Chairman Jimmy Pruitt were to be elected into the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame soon, and Eastman would decide that they wanted to erect a sign that said Eastman, Georgia, home of the best bass pro fisherman Jimmy Pruitt and Sports Hall of Fame member, that they would be allowed to do that and on a state, and as well as the DOT would be allowed to do this on a statewide basis for any of the other 250 members without having to go through local ordinances, local P&Z requirements. They would be allowed to put the sign on a state-maintained highway on the right-of-way. The bill does provide that the cost for these signs would be borne by the Sports Hall of Fame Authority, and we have gotten the support of the Georgia DOT as well too on this as well. I do have Ben Sapp, who is the executive director with the Sports Hall of Fame, who is here with us today. I'd love to have him share some information as well, or we can answer questions now, whatever your preference, Mr. Chairman.
I think we'll let Ben, glad to have you, let him speak, and then we'll get you back up, Alan, for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for considering this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick background on how this came to be. Our boards, both our authority and our nonprofit foundation board, took very seriously a couple of years ago the General Assembly's directive that we be self-sustaining by 2013. So we have been investigating alternative revenue streams, this being one of them. And we decided it would also have a secondary purpose of raising our profile throughout the state. We have not had the ability to market the museum like it ought to have been marketed, and to have these signs on state roads throughout the state would let people know that there is a Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, and perhaps investigate a little bit and find our museum in Macon. We looked at the idea of placing signs outside the homes of our Halls of Famers, and ran into a lot of red tape dealing with 160 different county commissions, 160 different planning and zoning boards, and discovered that perhaps the best way to do this would be to get the state's permission and work with the Department of Transportation to place these signs on state roads. We met last fall with Commissioner Vance Smith, who looked over our proposal, looked over the research we've done on the number of signs, the locations, those types of things, and he said, we would love to do it, but we're going to need a piece of legislation passed by the General Assembly. We put together this bill. Thank Representative Peake for introducing the bill, and ask that you all consider passing it for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sapp. I'll let you and Representative Peake stand there together because I don't know who may want to answer the questions. But do we have any questions at this time? 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we've got as of last week, it looks like we're going to have a lot more billboards around, so maybe you want to use those as well. I want to make sure I understand this. These are just on state roads?
Yes, sir, correct.
Okay. And on behalf of Chairman Stevens, we have a friendly amendment to move the Hall of Fame to Savannah. Would that create any problem with?
Depends on who you're asking here.
I think Shannon. We'll stay in Macon. It makes Shannon Sharp happy if we move to Savannah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all right.
Thank you.
We do have actually, just for the board members, I mean the committee members, the Sports Hall of Fame was required to have a RFP, and the Macon, and it has met all the requirements for that RFP to stay in Macon. So that's the plan as of right now. So to be self-sustaining as well.
Thank you. 23.
Thank you. So is the state going to be paying for the cost of the signage and placement, or that's going to be paid for through your organization?
No, it will be paid for. The authority is responsible
okay.
for all the costs associated with
there's a backside.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, there's a line in here that says the Georgia, on line 3, 4, and 5, they shall develop criteria for designating educational tourist attractions throughout the state. So that's not going to be a cost to the state?
Our authority currently operates on the revenue that the museum generates, and we'll continue to operate that way and work with DOT to determine exactly which towns and what locations that will place the signs.
Okay, so this is revenue neutral.
There is no
Correct.
cost to the state
Okay.
in this bill.
Thank you.
Representative Dempsey?
Yeah, I just had a question. I know last year I was appointed to serve on that, but I don't think we had any meetings, or either I didn't get the call to come to any of the meetings. But I'm well aware of the financial challenge that y'all face to stay alive and functioning. So I'm just a little curious about, I understand we're doing all possible to draw people as well as honor people, but how do y'all see doing this and at the same time then keeping your budget working?
Good question. You want to
The cost of each sign, and we've run this by everybody, the Department of Transportation, will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $750 and perhaps, say, $250 a year to maintain. Our hope is that the businesses and chambers of commerce and perhaps individuals in the hometowns of our Halls of Famers will want to have their Hall of Famers recognized and will help us with contributions towards putting these signs up, which perhaps could also end up generating revenue and not costing anything.
And if I can, Representative Dempsey, the RFP that was approved by the authority for the Sports Hall of Fame does put them on a total self-sustaining method on July 1st, I believe. Is it?
But beginning July 1, the museum will be managed by a nonprofit group in Middle Georgia called Halls of Fame, Inc. All funding will come from local government, private foundations, and our own generated revenue. So we'll be completely off the state's books July 1.
And the business plan they put forth so far has showed them being able to be self-sustaining, and this would just be an additional potential revenue if businesses in the communities wanted to support the signs, but that's not. I mean, I think the intent was to put up the signs regardless, one way or the other.
Exactly.
If the community wanted.
We want to raise the profile of the Hall of Fame. If it makes a little bit of money as well, obviously we'll be happy with that.
All right. If I may, too, I mean, why do we have to do it legislatively? I might have missed it.
In order to get approval to place each of these signs, we'd have to get each individual placement approved, either by a county commission or by a planning and zoning board in each of the individual counties for each individual location of the sign. If we're given blanket approval to work through the DOT and place signs on state highways in the right-of-way, then all 500 of our signs would essentially be approved in one fell swoop.
I mean, I see great advantage to it. At the same time, I'm concerned right now about our state as we're doing a lot of things that are, require dollars that are being trimmed in ways. So I worry about it. But this is private funding, in other words, what you're saying.
Exactly.
It's the authority from us, but the funding would not come out of anything from the state.
This will essentially grant the Department of Transportation the right to use our authority as the governing board of determining where these signs would be placed. It's similar to an exception the Department of Agriculture has right now, directional signs to things like wineries and orchards and other points of interest.
And
Okay.
appreciate your concern. Just want to make it real clear. The authority will receive 0 state dollars. So all of this will be funded by Halls of Fame, Inc., the new entity that will be managing the Sports Hall of Fame.
Great.
Representative Peake, I have a couple of questions to follow up on some of those already been asked. One is, if this allows us by DOT to get approval without any local legislation or any approval there, what if people, are you talking about putting signs in front of someone's home that actually is famous? You put it in front of their house if they live along the state highway?
This would primarily be signs as you enter someone's hometown, as in welcome to Savannah, hometown of Taz Anderson and Shannon Sharp, or welcome to Atlanta, hometown of Hank Aaron and Ted Turner. So we would not be putting these mainly in residential areas or even really in commercial areas. It would basically welcome folks to a town as you're entering it from some distance out.
I do have a concern that that's not spelled out in this bill, I don't think, though, and it leaves it open for you along a state route to put a sign in front of somebody's house that may be without their approval and invading their privacy.
Chairman Pruitt, if I may, I mean, in effect, DOT has that right now. I mean, any property, it's only going on the right of way. And so, I mean, if they chose to put a sign up now, the DOT has that.
I don't disagree with that, but it also would have to go through a local ordinance and those local people know who live in the homes, and it wouldn't be done without their knowledge, would be my concern.
I would venture to say, and the intent of the legislation would be that I don't think the authority would want to be putting up signs in a community that the community didn't want it.
Correct, and I think the State Transportation Board is given the final say on all rules and regulations and final placement of any signs. So it would not be left up just to our authority.
Yeah. Again, the intent being that the community would want this sign and want to be able to promote that their community did have a Georgia Sports Hall of Famer in its community.
Okay. Thank you. 19. I don't.
Yeah, you covered part of what I was wanting to address, but let me ask, how much interest do you have? How many potential designated areas do you all have right now that you're looking at?
We've been working on this for 2 or 3 years now, and several of our Hall of Famers and even their hometowns have asked us when the signs will be going up. And so with a very limited scope of people who even know that this is a possibility, we're already receiving interest, and I think it'll be a very successful program.
In a city the size of Atlanta, there's the potential, certainly in the future, of being numerous members of that, and I would assume there already are. How do you handle a city that has 6 or 8 or 10, and you just cram them all onto a sign, or
Small font.
Yeah.
small enough that nobody can see what the sign says as you're zipping by at 60 miles an hour?
Yeah. As far as places like Atlanta goes, there are so many entries to town that we would be able to place enough signs that we could recognize each and every one of our Hall of Famers. We also, in our pro forma plan, have budgeted $350 a year per sign for maintenance and updating. So as we have new Hall of Famers added, we would be able to update the existing signs. And if you had a place where you needed to put up a new sign, we'd go through the same process that we would here at the outset with looking for folks to help us put those up.
How many signs are you anticipating?
At the moment, in our pro forma, we've got 514 signs that would be placed throughout the state. So we're talking over, tens, hundreds of thousands of miles of highway, a total of 500 signs. But it would significantly raise the Hall of Fame's profile and help us in our marketing. And
those local communities or members of the communities are going to provide the funding for them?
No, the authority actually provides
the authority in our foundation will provide the funding for them at the outset. Our hope is that communities will look at these and be proud of their Hall of Famers and want to contribute to their placement and upkeep.
So it would be safe to assume then that if the communities are not going to raise the money, the authority's not going to go out and invest their money in putting a sign up if the community's not interested in helping with the funding of it.
There certainly won't be 514 signs put up in one day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman Neal, if I can address too, I think, again, keep in mind the original intent. While there may be a lot of Hall of Famers in Atlanta, the real intent, I think, where the authority and where BN are trying to go is in the outlying communities of our state. Those who do have a lot of pride that they have somebody from their community who is in the Sports Hall of Fame. And it is a point of kind of chest beating to be able to say when you're coming into Rome that it's the home of a particular Hall of Famer or other areas of our state. So that's the intent. I may be wrong. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure we're going to have a bunch of signs outside the city of Atlanta about the Sports Hall of Fame.
These aren't going up on 285. That's for sure. Yeah. And we just had our first 2 inductees from Moultrie inducted 2 weeks ago. Ray Goff and Lisa Spain Short. And Ray was the first one to be inducted. And they were giving each other a hard time all weekend about who was the first one from Moultrie to be inducted in the Sports Hall of Fame, even though they were inducted at the same time. So there is a significant amount of pride in some of our smaller communities and places where there's not but a few Hall of Famers, and I know they'd want that to be recognized when people visit.
Thank you, Representative Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask you, from time to time when you put signs up in communities, and unfortunately, people destroy those signs. And I would like to know, will you still be responsible for replacing the signs should that occur in any of the communities? I'm just looking at, because the community has been taken out of this totally, and the Department of Transportation is the entity that is going to be placing those signs. What does the community have to say about it? What does the individual community have invested in this, and are they going to have to invest if there's a sign that's destroyed? Who will replace that?
In our financial plan, like I said, we have budgeted for the initial manufacture and installation of the signs, but also for the maintenance and upkeep. And so we would do inspections of the signs, be open to folks telling us when they need any maintenance, and would coordinate that through the Department of Transportation.
And again, I'll just keep repeating this, Representative Sims. I mean, I think the intent of the authority is they're not going into any community that doesn't want them. I mean, you're only going to go into communities that really want these signs. Is that correct? That's the intent?
That's correct. One of the communities that currently is talking to us is Lawrenceville, which is home to Betty Janes, who's a Hall of Fame basketball coach and serves on our foundation board, and she was part of the genesis of this idea. And so her hometown knows that there is perhaps the possibility of these signs going up, and I know they're very excited and anxious to have the opportunity to recognize their hometown Hall of Famers. So those are the communities that we would be targeting, particularly initially. Again, we would work with the Department of Transportation and the State Transportation Board to determine all of the necessary rules and regulations. We would not be just out there planting signs with no oversight at all.
Yes.
That's me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In thinking about this, describe the sign to me. Is it going to be like the road naming sign, just a little, maybe a 2 metal pole sign with a small metal thing? It's not a billboard type thing.
No, not a billboard at all. It would resemble, it would probably not be the brown color, but you know the tourist attraction, the brown signs as you see going into towns, they'd be about that size. We would, only put enough information on them that they were legible.
So you get an idea what the dimensions are?
The dimensions, if I'd known I was coming here when I left home this morning, I would have been more prepared and would have, we actually have a mock-up of what they would look like. But they would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 8 by 5 feet. I mean, to be put on a state highway where you're traveling 55 miles per hour, they need to be fairly large in order to be legible. But they would still conform to all of the Department of Transportation standards about how many signs might be placed within a certain distance, and how close to an exit or how close to a traffic light, or how to, all of those regulations would still be in place and enforced on our signs as well.
Representative Hatchett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to pass.
All right, I'll be back with you in just a second. Got a couple more questions. I have a couple questions myself, if you don't mind. One is, if these people really want these signs, and you said that's where you're going to put them, I don't really understand what the problem is going through the normal process. And if they want them and they're going to approve them anyway, why you need this legislation?
The idea is that these would be uniform signs that people would recognize as they travel throughout the state, and it would reinforce the idea that these are all members, not of their local Sports Hall of Fame, but of the state of Georgia's Sports Hall of Fame. If you leave it up to the individual communities, there would be no uniformity to the signs, and it would be more of a local project rather than one that recognizes that these are folks who have been recognized by the state of Georgia.
And obviously we're giving you the authority to make the design, and would it fall into any current code of any kind, or will it be anybody else that will approve it other than you? The DOT have any say-so at all in the design?
It would be entirely under the discretion of the DOT. We would go through their, use the existing code that governs the creation of signs for state right-of-ways and work within that. And I believe that's included in the bill that the State Transportation Board would work with us to determine the regulations and everything else that we need.
It is, Chairman Pruitt, and 29, 30, and 31.
I see it. Thank you very much. I got two quick questions, and now we'll move on. Local zoning will have zero effect on this. I mean, you just would, if there is local zoning, it's just basically ignored. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that it's ignored, Chairman Pruitt. It's, I mean, the guidelines for the state maintained right-of-ways are already out there by the DOT, and so we would follow the same rules and regulations that we would follow for any sign that would have to be put up by the DOT.
I'm not certain that local zoning ordinances apply to state-maintained highways now.
I'm not sure, but even in the city limits, that's something I'm unaware of. I don't know.
We sit on Martin Luther King Boulevard in downtown Macon, which is a state road, and our own local police department can't even close the road without the permission of the DOT. And I know our city zoning board is not allowed to place signs on Martin Luther King. So I would assume that that's the same case for every community in the state.
I think it would beat the rules and regulations that are already in place for state-maintained highways now. So.
I got one last question. That's on line 26 on page 2, and it goes back to a question that's already been asked. It said the authority shall develop criteria for designing educational tourist attractions throughout the state. I'm not sure how that reflects on really putting up signs. What is the purpose of that being in this bill?
I think we can all agree that when I travel somewhere, I'm interested in knowing who is from that hometown. I know Atlanta's proud to be the home of Ted Turner and Hank Aaron and Billy Payne, although I guess Augusta would argue with Billy Payne now at this point. But you know, Macon is proud to be the home of folks like Otis Redding and Little Richard and Jamie Kaplan and Ed Everett. So I think it is of interest to the traveling public where exactly they are when they enter a town, and we'd like to help them know a little bit more about that.
Chairman Pruitt, if I can address that.
I may be misunderstanding it. It looks like to me that you're actually giving them permission to design tourist attractions. But am I Mr.
Chairman, if I can address that.
Please. Thank you.
I believe it was last year, or in the last couple of years, that there was, if you'll look on line 41, there was a put in the code a section called agricultural tourist attraction that was designed by the Department of Agriculture. This bill was modeled after what they did. So we established the educational tourist attraction definition in the code that only applies to this scenario and only applies to the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. And so that was the attempt of that language, was to make it narrow enough that it wouldn't apply to any tourist attraction, but only those specifically related to the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. So that was the attempt of the language.
Okay, thank you very much. Chairman Stevens has a question.
And it's mostly just a comment, Mr. Chairman. We had a couple of years ago, Chairman Butch Parrish put this very same legislation in for the wine country, and it's of course approved by the Department of Transportation. And so it's essentially, it looks like it's following the very same guidelines and placing those signs out there so that we can direct those people that are in that area. So it's looks pretty safe to me.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say this. I know you guys are struggling. We need to do everything we can to help you raise money, and certainly awareness is a key factor. And thank you. Are there any more questions? If not, I entertain a motion.
Chairman Pruitt,
yes,
I appreciate that. And just let me take a point to say Ben has done a great job. He's been an interim executive director for almost a year now, and has done a great job. We have tried to do our best to get to the point where the state is out of the Hall of Fame business, and we've accomplished that through a very united front down in Macon. And so you're right. That's exactly the intent of this legislation, just to make awareness of the Sports Hall of Fame and of the talent and people that we have in our state that have been inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame. So we appreciate your support on this bill.
I do think the bill is well intended. Open for motion. Have it do pass. Second. Got to get a bill number here. We have a motion, a second. There's a due pass for LC 211086. All approve? Oppose? Like sign? we do pass, and congratulations. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry about all the questions. Just want to get clarification, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the questions. We'll get them in rules, I'm sure. So we're glad to have them here. Thank you.
Very much so. Thanks, Ollie.
We now have Representative Powell, House Bill 475.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 475. It's LC 211186, I believe. As most of you know, there is a statutory development authorities law in the state of Georgia that provides that upon resolution, any city or county can establish a local development authority to enable it to enhance its development abilities and attract industry, finance industry, provide for projects. Some development authorities are more active than others. Some are purely conduit financing to enable tax-exempt projects and to come into a community. Some actually have funds that they can use to hire economic developers, and they're a little bit more proactive. But anyway, the GEDA, the Georgia Economic Developers Association, brought this bill to me, and what they wanted to do was to clarify some terms in the existing development authorities law, and also to enable the development authorities to do some things that maybe they currently cannot do to promote the advancement of economic development in the state. If I could go with you through the changes that are here, starting with line 19 in section 1. Currently, the law provides that airports, docks, wharves, mass commuting facilities, parking facilities, or storage or training facilities directly related to any of the foregoing are qualify as projects that could be financed or developed under the Development Authorities law. After that is in current law, the change would be, as used in this division, the term mass commuting facilities includes, and then it goes on and it states that it could be owned by a public entity, a private entity, or a combination of public or private entities, and further defines what mass commuting facilities can include. So what this does is it clarifies that both public and private entities can be involved in these kinds of projects, and also clarifies what mass commuting facilities, that is a term used in the existing law, what it means and what it can include. Now, if you look at Section 2, under current law, there is a list of types of projects that can be developed by or can be financed by a development authority. And there are things like nursing homes, office buildings, construction facilities, commercial facilities, industrial facilities. Anyway, there are a list of those, and what this, in starting with line 44, says that a development authority, when it finances one of these projects, can designate which of the paragraphs it comes under. And the reason that this is important is that a lot of times what development authorities do in order to try to attract a project to their community is that they will own the project and lease it back to the private business that is going to occupy it under a lease purchase arrangement. And the reason they do this is that that's one of the incentives that are available to local governments, is to provide for ad valorem tax abatement. They can't do it if the development authority doesn't own it and then lease it back. And there's a provision in the law that basically allows the equity in the property to be taxed, but not the entire property. In other words, if I lease a project from a development authority for a period of 20 years, the first year I may owe no ad valorem tax. The second year I may owe the amount that I've paid under that lease purchase that enhances my equity in the project, so that only the equity portion of it is taxed. And so, but I tell you that to tell you this, under some of those paragraphs, some things are subject to that tax abatement and some are not. And what this does is it says that if the development authority wants to offer that incentive to a business to come to their community, that they can pick a paragraph that they believe that it qualifies for tax abatement under, so that there is no, say for instance, office buildings are not included as property that can be tax abated. But say if you have a project that has a mixture of office and transportation, or a mixture of office and something else, you can say this qualifies as a transportation project, or this qualifies as a such and such project, so that you can offer that tax abatement. So it gives more flexibility to the development authority when they are trying to bring in a new business or a new project. And then finally in C, it just clarifies, and it specifies that this is not a change in existing law, but it just clarifies when bonds can be issued and for what bonds can be issued. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, but I think I've probably told you everything I know, plus some. But Jim Finch from the GEDA is here and will be available to answer questions, but I don't know if he can answer them any better than I can, but he's here. So anyway, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. We appreciate this. Anybody have any questions? Oh, come on. Don't let him off that line.
Everybody's ready for lunch.
I know. I will like to say this, that I am very familiar with development authorities and what a role they play, particularly in rural Georgia, and it's a great tool for us. And there have been some of these issues that have come up even in my little town, and this makes it definitely clear some things up that we've been struggling with. So I appreciate you bringing the bill. I'm open for a motion. Well, we have a move and a second on a due pass for LC 21-1186. All in favor? Any opposed, like sign?
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman.
carried. So moved. And with no other business, we'll be adjourned.